Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to those of you here in the room today in Dubai, and to those of you joining across the world on the virtual platform. We're really delighted to have you joining us today. There will be plenty of opportunity for everyone here to ask questions during the debate, so I urge you as we start to talk, get thinking what are the questions you would like to ask, both here in the room and also if you're on the virtual platform, please submit your questions through there. My name is Lucy Heady and I am the CEO of Education Sub Saharan Africa, an NGO using evidence and data from Africa to drive improvement in education for young people. And I'll be moderating the conversation today. Now, in 2007, Sub-Saharan Africa represented just 3% of the world's population. By 2027, that will have more than doubled to 7%, driven by a skyrocketing youth population. That generation of young people represents great hope for the continent. But we also see that generation losing faith in education, losing faith in government due to their frustrations with finding work. You might argue, with the reality of high unemployment, why stay in education? Is it a waste of time? Why bother studying for a job that doesn't exist? Yet demand for advanced skills has never been higher. Research from PwC shows that 87% of African CEOs can't find the skills and the talent that they need to grow their businesses. In today's debate, we're going to be getting to the heart of that paradox. We're asking, what is the point of tertiary education? Is it the win-win that allows young people to fulfill their ambitions at the same time as economies transition to high-tech, high-growth economies? Or is it simply raising false expectations that can't be fulfilled? We have a fantastic panel joining us here today to tackle these questions in what should be a positive yet provocative conversation. So let me welcome them now. I will go first to Jane Munga, who is an economic expert at the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth in Kenya, and has also been previously been an advisor to the Cabinet Secretary at the Ministry of the Interior. She holds a PhD in political science from the University of Alabama. I will now also introduce, giving the young person's perspective, Angel Mbuthia is from Kenya and is the Secretary for Gender and International Relations at the All African Students Union. She's a graduate student in Research and Public Policy at the University of Nairobi and was recently elected to the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa Youth Advisory Panel, tasked with strengthening the engagement of the youth within the region. Angela holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Sociology and Political Science from the University of Nairobi. And now I just need to ask, if anyone from the technical team could tell me, yes, here is Anarag. Welcome, Anarag, joining us virtually all the way from the States. Anurag is the co-founder and CEO of Quilt.AI, a technology firm aimed at enabling scale, understanding and empathy between organizations and the billions of humans on the planet. Companies including Amazon and non-profits such as the World Bank use Quilt.AI's analysis to connect better with their customers. Anurag has a master's in organizational development from Bowling Green State University and is an alumnus of Harvard Business School. So, this is a debate. We're going to have some tough questions. Let me move first to the policymaker for the hardest question. Jane. You work in a ministry that's responsible for a high technology and high growth sector in Kenya. When you think about strengthening the ICT industry, what do you see as the role of tertiary education in that?
Thank you, Lucy, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone. It's, of course, a pleasure to be here and just to engage in this discussion. First, I will be very on point and say, yes, there's still a role for tertiary education. But then comes the question that what exactly are we teaching in these tertiary institutions? The question that you've asked, then what is the role of ICT, is where I want to go, because as those of us who are in the ICT fraternity, we begin to see the potential of ICT technologies in how we are training our young people to be ready skilled for the future. ICT technologies, as we know, is the future. And if we want our young people to be part of this future, then we have to start coming with vital collaborations within government, within policymakers, and say, education has to change. It's no longer the traditional education of knowledge. It has to be practical. It has to give them the required skills. Today, most young people, when they're graduating, they have like 5 different technology platforms. This is different from when I graduated, and I still can't keep in touch with my friends because there was no email. Anyway, that's not about me, but it's about what these young people now have to have. So it's having that conversation as policymakers. What is right for our young people? So education has to be competent. It has to give them the skills. It has to give them the right connections, and also the change of mindset that you now also have to be a creator, and you have to go seize the world and see exactly what opportunities are there. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And I might pass over then to Anarag. You work in a very high-tech sector where you need graduates with really high skill sets. So when we think about skilling up for young people for work, where does the role of universities and colleges stop? And where does the role of employers start?
Well, I don't think it's as much as a start and a stop as much as a continuum. I think colleges and universities need to work much more coherently with employers. As an employer who has now colleagues and employees across 19 countries, we've realized that it is possible to find fantastic talent in multiple places. And so, and often what we've tried to do is build a structure of internships, starting very early in the process with a very large pool of talent. And we work with them for the summer, for the winter, but also through the semesters. And we find that colleges and universities that are proactive in creating a co-op program or an employee experience program or a program that gives credits for work are the ones that best prepare their students for the workforce.
Thank you, Anurag. And then maybe to Angel, like listening to, to what you've just heard, how is that from a young person's perspective? Do young people in universities know what they want? And how are they prepared to transition to work? Do they see this vision presented by Jane and Anurag of joined up conversations between educators and policymakers?
All right, thank you, Lucy, so much for the excellent introduction. And first of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish Kenyans a happy Jamhuri Day. Today we mark the day we attained independence. And independence was something that was remarkable across the continent. And if I may take you back, that movement started in West Africa. And who started these movements? These movements were started by students. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah from West Africa in Ghana was a student and mobilized other students from West Africa, and therefore becoming the first country in Africa to gain independence. This was a student movement at that time. So even the liberation from colonialism came from students. So when we talk about students not being able to understand the dynamics of today, it is because the dynamics have changed. The opportunities that we had after 1963, when Kenya attained independence, were more prevalent in governance, were more prevalent in business, were more prevalent in just forming the structures, because that was the birth of a country. So there were opportunities at that time, and they are different now today because we are now in a digital revolution. And so as we are learning and going through the education system, we also need to understand that there are new dynamics that are taking place in the rest of the world. Now we can communicate better from America from continent to continent. And now COVID-19 has even showed us how connected we are, that someone in Wuhan can affect someone in my village because people in my village now have to put on masks because of that. The global connectivity is much stronger, and that openness is what's making students look confused, but they are not. It's just that they're in a structured system of institutions, there's bureaucracy, and all this not being able to come together is a problem now that we're facing. Again, I want to emphasize that students are the epitome of governance. They are the creme de la creme of the society, and therefore they understand what governments should be in place, and they get their agitations to whatever levels they do, and they score really highly in schools. I'm here advocating for students because they do a great job, coming from very humble backgrounds, making it to Harvard and all these other top universities in the world. So students really get meaningful education. But what are they getting after that education? Are we paying enough for that education? And so if students have to go to school, I mean, now that we are socializing them, that once they're done with school, they should get employed. I mean, is that the narrative? Was that the essence of education? We reinvented the wheel. We went to the fourth industrial revolution. We got our hands dirty. Is white-collar jobs really the thing that we need to sell right now? Uhuru Kenyatta, my president, is championing manufacturing and housing, affordable housing, as part of his agenda. And the country doesn't have plumbers, doesn't have electricians, doesn't have enough nurses. And we need to celebrate those professions. It's just about paying them, remunerating them. That is what will encourage more students to go there. We're talking about climate change and agriculture. I mean, agriculture needs to be made sexy enough for students to want to be part of it. I mean, look at how Dubai is challenging us, a city under the hot sun, but really doing remarkable things. And so as much as we are being challenged, I would ask students not to be discouraged at any point. Students are the same ones who've done COVID-19 sequencing, which has been used by governments to give policy briefs, to give restrictions. I mean, what we are having is PhD students are working on this. I mean, who anticipated COVID-19? So the impact of students in our communities is heavily felt. All we need to do is open up more opportunities, create environments that are enabling for students to be able to have more innovative ideas, more business environments that will be able to protect their properties, to protect their returns, and I mean, take everything back home that now we are seeing through this COVID-19 time.
Thank you, Angel. And to check understanding you correctly, are you seeing that young people are graduating with, shall we say, misplaced expectations about how the world of work is going to be? And do you see a role for universities and colleges in shaping those expectations?
All right, let me go to Dr. Martin Luther, who is convinced that people hate each other because they fear each other, and they fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they don't communicate each other. So we need to communicate, and we need to showcase what we need versus what we want, and create the normal demand and supply curve that will be able to harness the needs and the opportunities that are available.
Thank you, Angel. And maybe that's a great segue over to Jane, because you are part of this high-tech sector that I think a lot of graduates would love to move into. And from your perspective, are universities and colleges delivering what the sector needs? We've heard about the rapidly changing nature of jobs and the economy. Are universities and colleges keeping up? Are they remaining relevant?
Thank you, Lucy. And to Angel's point, I think, first, let's say, we are trying to communicate. I think sometimes there's this misperception that as government, we don't hear, or we're not listening to what is happening, or we are not in touch with the realities. And this is one of the, I think it becomes the touch point or the rubbing point between the young people and governments. especially when their issues are so dear to them and they're so emotional because they're looking for jobs, they're looking for so forth. But I think I want to first, before I get directly to answer, is that we are very aware as government, we are also very aware of these situations. But government is like a big ship. It takes a while to turn a big ship around. And that's where, as government, we try and work with our young people to understand that, and maybe that's what we do need is better communication, but we are listening and we know that these issues are there. Now, our universities, are they being able to handle this, or are they producing the graduates that we need? I think traditionally we've seen there's a mismatch. I don't think that's an argument. You quoted some great statistics, and we have those great statistics out in Kenya. A lot of our young people are working out of work, and they don't have readily available jobs, or there's a mismatch. So as government, we started partnering now with many private sector, especially those that have come to us, the associations of engineers, the association of doctors, and telling us that the young people who are coming out are not readily skilled. So now we have a lot of collaborations whereby we have what we call, one I would want just to point out is a presidential digital talent program for engineers. Anybody who's coming out of engineering school, we've partnered with these institutions in Kenya, and we give them a 1-year internship program, 6 months in government, 6 months in the private sector. So they get that mismatch, or we try and cope or see how we can now prepare our students. And most of them at 99% are being retrained, are being kept either by government or by these private sectors. So yes, there's a mismatch. I don't think I'm here to say that there's not. That issue is there, but we are beginning to understand how can we work better through collaborations. I think for us, the key is collaborations and communication. And also a message, because I know now she's presenting the youth, that I think government is us, it's here. And we have really opened up our government to young people. We have what we call the Generation Unlimited in Kenya, whereby we are all about youth, and we want to sit with the youth to understand what are these their issues. So I was in another panel earlier, and they were talking about we need youth in these conversation tables. We need youth in the governance table. And I think that's a message that has been heard, and one that governments are embracing, that unless you have the young people in the conversation table making the decisions, then you cannot continue to make relevant decisions for them without them being there. So the conversation has arrived in government, and that is shifting policy-wise. But again, this takes time, and we need to understand that in government, time is not overnight. I think we also I call them the microwave generation. Everything needs to happen today. But it takes time, and we are really trying to understand how can we respond to these issues, because at the end of the day, these are children, this is our future, and we want to ensure that they are skilled and readily tooled for the future. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Jane. And I see that some technical issues have been overcome, and we now have our fourth panelist joining us. I'd love to introduce Professor Angela Owusu-Ansah, who is the Provost of Ashesi University, one of the leading universities in Ghana. She oversees faculty and drives excellence in instruction and research in line with Ashesi's vision to drive an African renaissance. Angela has over 30 years of experience in academic and development research and holds a PhD in higher education administration, quantitative research methods, and social science statistics and instructional technology in the United States. Welcome, Angela. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'm afraid, Angela, I think we're just going to drop you straight in it with a question. You've listened to Jane talking about, government is trying to do what it can to support the system, but it's maybe can't move as fast as people would like it to. What can an organisation like Ashesi do while they're waiting for government systems to catch up in terms of really preparing youth for the job market?
Thanks for having us. Your question is fair in that, there's the government, there's industry, there's all the other pieces that go together when we talk about the triple helix or anything else like that. But in Ashesi, for example, granted that there are not enough jobs for graduates, but in preparing our students, we believe that we should go beyond just preparing them for the job market, and that the university's role is much, much larger than that. And so we prepare our students to make them sustainable, to make valued impact on the continent. And employability happens to be one of the competencies, but is not the only one. So we prepare our graduates for the workplace, training all our graduates in entrepreneurship knowledge, skills and dispositions, training them to have concern for others and empathy, and to have the courage it will take to transform the continent. The university experience at Ashesi is holistic, looking at better citizenry and ethical thinking, and unpacking this emerging philosophy of African futurism, which originally emerged as a genre, a fiction genre, but is fast becoming a potential philosophy. And I'll just quote a little bit. It talks about how African futurism is concerned with visions of the future. It's interested in technology, skews optimistic, is centered on and predominantly written by people of African descent, and it is rooted first and foremost in Africa. It's less concerned about what could have been and more concerned with what is and can and will be. It acknowledges and grapples with, carries what has been. That's a quote from Nendi Okorafor. So I share that to say that for us, preparing our students is beyond employment. It's for the larger good of the continent. And in addition to, the immediate work we do with students, we have a unit called the Education Collaborative, which has a very simple but powerful mandate. And what it does is it invites universities on the continent to share best practices and to mentor each other in their university strengths. One such identified strength is preparing students for employment. And Ashesi University's Education Collaborative has currently engaged 2 other universities to help mentor and assist 3 universities on the continent for an 18-month period of systems change and the development of career services in their respective universities. And ESSA is providing us with some research on how effective this approach is going to be. So we have a variety of ways to wait for the government.
Thank you, Angela, and delighted to be partnering with you on that initiative. Anurag, we've just heard from Angela how a tertiary education is so much more than simply about employability. If employers are becoming frustrated at the talent pipeline, shouldn't they be contributing more to education systems to get the kind of graduates that they want to see?
In short, yes, but I want to weave in some of my co-panelists' comments, and because this is a debate, I'm going to try and be a little controversial with permission. So I think there are 3 themes that are interesting here. One is I do believe that given the globalization capability that exists today, and the points were made around the connectivity between Wuhan and Kenya and India and Boston, etc., I think my largest challenge with young people coming out of the education systems is sometimes their education, but sometimes their lack of curiosity. And I think it was a pleasure to just hear you talk about the holistic nature of education. And I think the more we can do that, the more we will arm young people with a better future. And I think us holding governments accountable to be nimble is hard. And I think every government intends and tries to do the best it can. But it is the same young people who come into the government, right? So I think, so those are the 2 controversial points I wanted to make, is about young people taking a little more control of their own destiny, using the resources that are available digitally. In terms of answering your question in more detail, of course, I think employers are not fully responsible and caring and involved in the process of shepherding students and creating that talent pool. I think there are different kinds of skills that employers need, and not everything is high tech. The plumber comment that was made was actually kind of funny, because it is true. We have a need for a wide variety of colleagues to join our workforces. And I think there should be some model of almost governmental tax that sits on employers that should create a fiscal system that drives scholarship or drives cost alleviation that then becomes a consistent way. So if you, it's like tax. If you participate in the goodness of a society, then you need to give to that, and that just can't just be corporate tax, etc. So I know this won't be popular with my fellow employers, but I think there's an intent to pay it forward, because then that's how we'll benefit down the road with more amazing colleagues.
Fantastic, Anurag. Always controversial to propose a new tax, for sure. I think we have enough time to take just a couple of questions from the audience. Do we have any hands up in the audience? No, otherwise I will take maybe the chair's privilege to ask one last question to Angel. How would you respond to Anurag's challenge that young people need to be taking more control of their destiny? Don't wait for the educators, for the employers, for the policymakers to solve the problem for you.
All right, that goes into a very huge stake, because when a student wants now to pick out the courses they want to pick on, they look at, what is being provided by, what is available from the institutions, and what is being recognized. Now, we are now trying to accredit digital certificates and all that. And before institutions can really recognize that a digital certificate that you got online from some learning skill that you gained, then until then, we give students very limited opportunities and very few options. So we need to also be dynamic in our institutions. So I would call on the students across the world to really push their universities to be more dynamic in terms of changing courses, refreshing courses, because if it takes up to about 18 months to issue a new undergraduate course, a course that maybe you needed 2 years ago, now is being offered 2 years later. How relevant is that in your own context? So we need to push our universities to become more dynamic, to have less bureaucracy, so that we are able to change according to the world of work. Because the industry of work is fast changing. Look at how COVID-19 has really disrupted everything, including learning. So now we've had to really adapt very quickly, and that should not really be the case. We should be ready in case that happens. And so we need to push our higher learning institutions to be more dynamic.
Thank you, Angel. And a great call to action for young people out there. Jane, Anurag, Angela, I might ask you similarly as we're coming to the end of this debate. Jane, what would be your call to action for the policymaker? Anurag, you for employers, and Angela, you for educators. And I'll start with Jane.
My apologies. I think for me, my clarion call would be, as government, we need to really support young people to be creation makers. A couple of weeks ago, I attended a session where young people were it was a youth agenda call to action week. And I met a young man who had a graduate degree in chemistry. He was quite top of his class. And 1 year he didn't have any job, and he told me that after that he decided to go online and create a platform where he's connecting people who need, like for example, you need a carpenter, or you need a tailor. So he created that kind of platform to create that match. And he challenged me as government and said, that's the kind of support that we need when we create, that we have an enabling system that helps us to create. So I think for us is hearing more those young people telling us that they are creating. And for me, that continues to be a challenge, that don't wait for the solutions to come to you, because sometimes you have to create them and let the solution come to your table. And then for us as government is, how do we then create that enabling environment? Yes, you have the skills, you have all the opportunities, then how do you ensure that you're able to thrive in whatever that you're creating? Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. Anurag, your call to action for employers.
3 things. 1, give more internships, starting from first year of college. 2, create learning opportunities for young people to go across your company, so you don't hire in a particular role and keep them there. And I think many big companies do an awesome job of that. And 3, figure out and pay some kind of a donation or a tax or an investment into some of the universities.
And Professor Angela, what should educators be doing?
Well, I'll flip it a bit and say, what should the students be doing as well? It's kind of a double-edged sword there. 3 suggestions. First is that learning as a lifestyle and purpose, and perhaps Dweck's growth mindset. I would suggest that in this emerging future, education becomes spread across the lifetime of a person, instead of the focus on, getting a degree by the time you're 25, and that's supposed to be the ultimate. And instead that recognize that get the degree by the time you're 25, and work in a particular place till you retire, decades later. With increased longevity and higher levels of volatility and complexity, etc., I think that model has become obsolete. It is not possible to prepare as a learner just once for your entire lives. You'll need to learn and unlearn, relearn, reskill, upskill throughout your lifetime. And then secondly, your purpose should be more than getting a job, being able to fend, or just being able to fend for your family. In Africa, for example, only 6 to 7% of individuals that are eligible for college actually do get to college, and most become the leaders, the doctors by default. And so determine whatever position you find yourself in to drive the change. Everyday things, refusing to bribe, refusing to take a bribe, standing up for someone who's less disenfranchised or disenfranchised. And then lastly, the Dweck mindset, just knowing that your abilities and effort do fire new neurons, etc. And so it's more than, your education in a tertiary institution is really all about you in the end, and that you should take it at the helm and make the best of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Anurag. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Angel, for this conversation today. Angela ended that on, I think, probably the most challenge today has been placed at the feet of the young people. It is, after all, the young people who are going to be making the change, and so perhaps that's right. But one of the things that clearly comes from this conversation is how are young people to understand where they need to go. They need more information, they need more evidence about what employers want, what employers need, what government strategies are, and what can universities and colleges bring them. So we need that knowledge, we need that data, and we need to democratize that data. It can't just be sitting in government departments, in policymakers. It must be in the hands of young people. If we're going to challenge them to solve these problems themselves, we must give them the tools to do so. And I just want to finish the conversation by asking anyone who's interested to please visit the ESSA website to access more evidence and data related to tertiary education. Find out how you can join the conversation, collaborate with educators, employers and young people, and other ways you can support our work. And one last thank you to all our panelists today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.